Hi guys, it's been a while since I put a gaming video up, so today is my top 5 Xbox classic games. The Xbox is still one of my favourite console systems. The 360 we've got at the minute, but when it comes down to the ease of the controllers, I found them to be a lot better than, say, the PlayStation controllers. And it's only really due to sentimental value that the N64 and GameCube kind of win out in terms of which consoles are my favourite. Now, I don't intend on getting the one for some time, but certainly getting the Xbox 360 was a blessing for us because it meant that I can get the Xbox Classics games all over again. So I'm going to go into which ones were my top 5. Now, number 5 for me was Lord of the Rings: The Third Age. It was released in 2004. It's a role-playing game and it involves a group of characters that are following a storyline that's closely linked to the storyline based in the Lord of the Rings films. Now, EA owned the rights to the films but not the books, so any story that they came up with had to either be related to the films directly or be not related to either the books or the films, so they couldn't get too creative with it, to be honest. However, this was the first game I've ever played that had a turn-based combat system. Now, I believe this was based on one of the Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy X, and I really liked it. For one thing, it was something that was repeated in Knights of the Old Republic, which was another game that I really enjoyed. The reason I really liked this game, aside from the combat system, was the storyline. It was interesting, despite the fact that it wasn't as creative as it could have been, but obviously down to certain rights issue, they couldn't be too creative with it anyway. And at the time I was really into Lord of the Rings kind of games, so this one out of all of them really was enjoyable for me because I really didn't like the film adaptations. Number 4 is The Bard's Tale. Now, this was a role-playing game released in 2003 and it's basically taking the piss out of every single fantasy role-playing game that there is. Now, the Bard, our hero, if you can even call him that, is more interested in boobs and getting drunk than really saving the world. But eventually he gets recruited to save the princess, which probably doesn't turn out as people expect. Now, with most role-playing games, you do have the choices of dialogue which will affect the situations that you find yourself in. And The Bard's Tale is no different to that. As well as this, you have the narrator who is constantly breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience and seems to really hate the Bard. Now, The Bard's Tale is really good because it really does parody RPGs which do a lot of strange things. For example, in the first level, you kill rats in a cellar. Anyone who's played a role-playing game on a console will probably be familiar with that concept. They might also be familiar with the concept of killing animals which somehow drop gold. And what about looting homes or breaking crates and barrels to get shiny things? They really need to come up with another game like this, seriously. Number 3 is Fable. Now, the original version for the Xbox was released in 2004, but there was a Lost Chapters extended version released later. And this was one of the first open world fantasy RPGs that I've played, aside from any of the Elder Scrolls ones. And the Fable series tends to follow the same kind of generic, you control a hero who eventually comes linked with the Heroes Guild. Because apparently you can't just be a normal hero with the little h, you have to be one with a capital H and have to be part of this fancy guild or something. Aside from a problem that I have that apparently normal people can't become heroes because they obviously can't do good deeds themselves, I like the fact that they definitely had a good and evil alignment system where your choices and the way you speak to people affects how you're viewed in the world, and it also affects your appearance, so if you're more evil you'll look more evil and people will react accordingly. Now, obviously this doesn't automatically happen in the real world, so you know. However, in Fable I really like the fact that certainly in all of the games that I've played in the series, eating and drinking food that isn't too good for you actually affects your appearance as well, and drinking too much makes you puke. Number 2 is the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Now, this was the first open world fantasy RPG that I'd ever played, and that was in 2003, and it was also the first Elder Scrolls game I've ever played. Now, this one's set in Vardenfell, which was in the province of Morrowind, and the central quest involves you being kind of the chosen one destined to stop Dagoth-Ur. Now, Morrowind really opened my eyes to the possibilities that RPGs really could provide for gamers like myself. And I've got to admit, with Morrowind, and certainly with Oblivion and Skyrim, I have to say, I really enjoy side quests far more than the central quest. Which isn't to say that the central quests are crap, it's just that I think the side quests have made it so much more interesting, which is why I really do like role-playing games as a whole. I think with Morrowind, the only quests I never got to complete were the main houses. I especially like doing the Thieves Guild and the Fighters Guild quests. Number 1 is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. BioWare released this in 2003, and since I've played this, I've never looked back. For me, it's really a debate of whether or not I like this one more than Knights of the Old Republic 2, which was released on the 360. Certainly for me, this is the best classic Xbox game I played. Now, I posted a video up not long ago about the roles of female protagonists in games. And obviously the canon Revan is a guy, however, I have played this as a girl a lot, and it's so much cooler when it's a girl. Now, as I said before with Morrowind, for me side quests make it a much bigger, more complete game for me, and Knights of the Old Republic was no exception. Now, as you can probably tell by the shirt that I'm wearing right now, I am a fairly huge Star Wars fan, and the expanded universe is my favourite part of Star Wars in general. And obviously there are certain things happening with Disney's acquiring Lucasfilm and the forthcoming films, which I could have a rant about here, but I'll leave it for now. KOTOR was something that really opened my eyes to how good turn-based combat could be, and also to the concept of choices really affecting your alignment, which is the same with Fable as well. I think ultimately what tops this over, say, Morrowind or Fable, however, is the fact that it's Star Wars. For me, it was the chance to play in a universe that I had a great affinity for. And I finally got to run around as a character wielding lightsabers. So that's my top 5 Xbox classic games. My questions for you this week are: which classic Xbox games do you consider to be your top 5? Are there any that you think they should have made or shouldn't have made? As always, leave your comments in the box below. Feel free to leave any feedback on the Facebook page, like, share, subscribe on here. And feel free to check out the blog. And thanks for watching.